Welcome back to Inside the Philippines Journals, the channel where we sit down with the men and women who went looking for a second chance out here in these islands and tell you the truth about what they found. Some of these stories end in sunlight. This one lives somewhere in between. The man you're going to hear from today is named Dale. He's 65 years old, from a small city in eastern Iowa. The kind of place where everybody knows what your father did for a living. He spent about 30 years as a carpenter and a joiner, a man who trusted a square edge and a level line more than he ever trusted words. When his knees finally gave out on him, he traded the tool belt for a desk and a computer, doing estimates and drawings from home for a company that sells cabinets and building supplies. A remote job, they call it now. Steady work for a quiet house. And it was a very quiet house. What Dale is going to tell you is a story about loneliness and about money he never expected to have, and about a decision he made that he's still a little ashamed of. He did something to find out the truth, and the truth, when it came, was not simple. It rarely is out here. If you're watching this, do me a favor. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've lived through something like this yourself, share it. Somebody down there needs to read it. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Here's his story, in his own words. I want to start by saying I'm not a talker. Never have been. My wife, my first wife, Carol, used to say talking to me was like talking to a fence post that occasionally agreed with you. She wasn't wrong. 30 years of framing houses and building cabinets, you get used to letting the work do the talking. A drawer either slides true or it doesn't. There's no arguing with it. So this is hard for me, sitting here like this. Bear with me. I grew up outside Dubuque, right along the river. My dad was a millwright. My mother kept the books for a feed store. We were the kind of people who reused aluminum foil and thought a trip to the Menards was an outing. I took to carpentry the way some kids take to a sport. There's a rightness to it. You measure twice, you cut once, and if you do your part, the thing you build outlives you. I liked that. I liked knowing my hands made something a family would eat dinner at for 40 years. Carol and I had 2 kids, Kevin and Sarah. And I'll be honest with you, I was a better carpenter than I was a father. I was there for the paychecks and the school things and the deer season, but the inside of me, the part that talks, one kept that closed up. That was how my old man did it, so that's how I did it. Carol passed in 2014. Cancer. Fast, thank God, but too fast. And after that, the kids scattered. Kevin went out to Seattle to do something with computers I still can't explain. Sarah went to Boston, then Atlanta, then someplace I'd have to look up. They called. For a while they called. Then it got to be birthdays. Then it got to be nothing but a text with a little cake picture on it. I don't blame them. I want to say that plainly. I built a house they didn't feel welcome to knock on the door of, and then I was surprised when they didn't. My knees went about the same time. All those years kneeling on subfloor and squatting under sinks. The doctor showed me the X-ray and said it looked like a gravel road. So I hung it up. The company I'd done contract work for offered me a desk job I could do from the house, estimating jobs, drawing them up on the computer. Good of them. I took it. And that's when the quiet really set in. You don't notice quiet when you're swinging a hammer. But you sit alone in a house at a computer, and the furnace kicks on, and the clock ticks, and the phone doesn't ring, and you start to hear yourself think. I did not like what I heard. Then in 2022, my brother Gary died. Gary was 2 years younger than me and twice as smart, though he'd never have said so. Never married, no kids, worked for the railroad and saved every nickel like it owed him money. When the lawyer read it out, I sat there in a plastic chair and didn't understand for a minute. He'd left it all to me. After everything, once the account settled, it came to just under 6.5 million pesos. I'm giving you the peso number because that's how I think about it now. But back then, it was dollars to me. About 115,000 American. I had never in my life held money like that. A carpenter doesn't. You make a living, you don't make a fortune. And here it sat in an account with my name on it, and Gary gone, and my kids gone, and Carol gone, and me 63 years old sitting in a quiet house with more money than I'd ever seen, and not one living soul to spend a Sunday with. I'm not proud of what I did next. I started watching videos at night. You know the ones. Retire in paradise. Live like a king for $1,000 a month. Beautiful beaches, and men my age, older even, sitting in the sun with a young woman laughing at their jokes. And I told myself I was just curious, just passing the time. But I'd sit there in that recliner at 11 o'clock at night, furnace ticking, and I'd think, what am I saving it for? What is any of it for? There's nobody to leave it to who'd notice. That's the part one want you to understand before I tell you the rest. It wasn't greed and it wasn't lust, whatever you're thinking. It was that I wanted somebody to need me again. I'd spent my whole life being useful. A man who fixes things, builds things, provides. And nobody needed me for a single thing anymore. That's a specific kind of empty. If you've felt it, you know. If you haven't, God keep you from it. So one night in the spring of 2023, I booked a flight to a place called Cebu. 2 weeks. I told myself it was a vacation. I told Kevin it was a vacation. And he said, "Cool, Dad, send pictures." And that was the whole conversation. I bought new shirts. 63 years old. Buying new shirts to fly to the other side of the world by myself. If you'd have told the man I was at 40 that he'd do such a thing, he'd have laughed you out of the shop. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about getting off that plane. The heat hit me first. You step out of that airport in Cebu, and it's like opening an oven, a wet oven. And the smell, diesel and salt and something sweet cooking somewhere, and flowers, and underneath it all this green, wet smell I didn't have a word for. It was 2 in the morning, and there were people everywhere. Kids selling things, men shouting about taxis, a whole world awake in the dark. I stood on that curb with my one suitcase, and I thought, Dale, you old fool, what have you done? And a part of me, a part one hadn't heard from in years, was excited. Actually excited. First time in a long time. I didn't know it yet, but I'd already left the man I used to be back on that curb. The first few days I mostly hid. I'll admit that. I stayed at a hotel near a big mall, the Ayala, they call it, and I ate at the places I recognized, and I sat by the pool feeling every one of my years, and about 10 more. I'd come all that way, and I didn't have the first idea what to do with myself. There was a fella at the hotel bar, an Australian named Rob, been out there 15 years. He took one look at me and knew exactly what I was. Fresh off the boat, he said, not unkindly. He'd married a local woman, seemed happy enough, ran some kind of business. He was the one who told me most of what I'd been watching online was rubbish, his word, and that the men who did all right out here were the ones who slowed down and used their heads. Don't fall in love in the first week, mate, he said. Everybody falls in love in the first week. It's the heat. I told him I wasn't out there for that. I don't think either of us believed me. Rob took me around to a bar he liked, a rooftop place with plastic chairs and a view of the traffic, where a certain kind of expat gathered in the late afternoon. I want to tell you about those men, because they matter to the rest of this, even though they're not in it much. There were maybe a dozen of them, most my age or older, a Brit, a couple of Germans, a big loud Texan named Wally, who'd been out there 20 years, and there were two kinds among them, and I couldn't tell which kind I'd become. One kind was happy, genuinely. Wally had a wife he'd been married to for 18 years, and grandkids he doted on, and when he talked about her, it was with a plain, steady warmth, no bitterness in it. He told me it could work, this life, if you kept your head and your wallet both about half shut. Slow down, he said, same as Rob. Meet the family before you promise anybody anything. Learn a few words of the language, so you know when they're talking about you. The other kind was poisoned. There's no gentler word for it. Old men nursing a warm San Miguel, and a grudge, who'd been burned once and now hated the whole country for it. Who'd tell you every Filipina was a black widow, and every family a pack of thieves, and every one of them the same story. I sat and listened to a red-faced Englishman go on for an hour about the woman who'd ruined him, and I remember thinking, plain as day, I never want to become that. I never want to be a man who hates a whole people because he made a bad bet with his own lonely heart. 2 years later, I understand both of those men in a way I didn't want to, and I'll tell you now, I fought hard not to end up the second kind. That fight is most of what my story's about, in the end. But that was later. That first trip I just listened, and drank my beer, and drove home in a tricycle through the warm diesel night, and didn't yet know that the woman who'd change everything was a friend of Rob's own wife. It was Rob's wife, a kind woman named Aileen, who introduced me to Malou. They had a little get-together at their place my second week, some friends over, San Miguel in a cooler, a karaoke machine murdering the eagles in the corner. And Malou was one of Aileen's friends. She wasn't the youngest woman there, and she wasn't done up like the others. She was 38, which felt almost honest to me at the time, not some 22-year-old who'd call me handsome with a straight face. She had this quiet way about her, sat a little apart, watched people the way I watch people. I want to describe her fair, because it matters to the rest of this. She wasn't beautiful the way those videos promise. Well, she was, but not like that. She had a face that had worked hard, a steadiness in her eyes. When she smiled, it was slow, like it cost her something, and she'd decided you were worth it. We got to talking on Rob's little balcony, away from the karaoke. She'd worked as a caregiver in Dubai for 6 years, wiping the backsides of old people so her family back home could eat. Came home when her father got sick. She was the eldest of 5. She said all this plainly, not fishing, just answering. She asked me about my work, and when I said carpenter, joiner, she lit up and told me her Lolo, her grandfather, had been a carpenter in their province, made furniture from a wood called Nara, and I told her I knew Nara. Beautiful stuff. And for 20 minutes we just talked about wood. Grain and joints and the smell of a fresh planed board. I hadn't talked that long to a living soul in maybe 2 years. She didn't ask me for anything. That's the thing I keep coming back to. That whole night, that whole first week of knowing her, she didn't ask me for one thing. When I offered to pay for a grab car home for her, she wouldn't take it. Said her cousin was coming. I flew back to Iowa 10 days later with her number in my phone, and a feeling in my chest I hadn't had since I was a young man. We'd texted good morning and good night every single day. Not love talk. Just, how'd you sleep? "What are you building today? Did you eat?" She always asked if I'd eaten. Nobody had asked me that in a long, long time. And I sat in my quiet house in the snow that came early that year, and I looked at my phone lighting up with her good mornings coming in at the wrong hours because of the time difference, and I thought, there it is. Somebody's thinking about me. Somebody wants to know if I ate. I know how that sounds. A lonesome old man reading the whole world into a text message. But you tell me you wouldn't have felt it too. You sit in that quiet long enough. A little warmth looks like the sun. I booked my second flight before Thanksgiving. That second trip was 6 weeks, and that's when it became real. And that's when the money started, and I want to walk you through it honest. Because the money is the part everybody wants to judge, and nobody wants to understand. I stayed longer this time, and Malou and I were together most days. Not living together. She was careful about that, about what people would say, and I respected it. She'd meet me and we'd go to the market, or she'd cook for me at Aileen's, real food, sinigang so sour it made my eyes water, and she'd laugh at my face. She took me to a Mang Inasal and taught me to eat with my hands, and I made a disaster of it, and she laughed at that too. I liked being laughed at by her. It didn't feel mean. Cebu got into me on that trip, I'll admit it. Not just the woman, the place. I'd wake up before the heat to the roosters going and the first jeepneys grinding past, and a neighbor's radio, and somebody frying something, garlic and rice, that smell that means morning out there. Malou would take me down to the wet market where she bought fish with the eyes still bright, haggling in a language I couldn't follow, and vendors would call me Sir and Joe and laugh, and she'd laugh with them and then translate the nicer half of it for me. We'd get halo in the afternoon heat, this crushed ice thing with beans and fruit and purple yam on top that I thought sounded like a dare, and turned out to be about the best thing I ever ate. In the evening, the karaoke would start up in 3 houses at once, everybody murdering the same sad songs, and she'd hum along at the sink. I want you to understand, it wasn't all money and worry, at least not at the start. There were good weeks in there, real ones. A man doesn't spend what I spent chasing a thing that felt like nothing. She told me more of her story on that trip. Her father, back in their province in Leyte, had land, a few hectares, coconut, and some rice. But no money, which she explained is the most Filipino thing there is, land rich and cash poor. Her mother had the sugar, the diabetes, bad, needed medicine every month. And she had a daughter. She told me about the daughter carefully, watching my face the whole time. A girl, 12 years old, named Jasmine, living with the grandmother in the province. The father was long gone, she said. A local man, no good, disappeared before the girl could walk. She'd been sending money home from Dubai all those years for Jasmine's schooling. Now, a lot of men hear she has a kid from before, and they run. I'll tell you the truth. It did the opposite for me. It made her more real. Here was a woman who'd spent her whole life taking care of people. Her patients, her parents, her daughter. Nobody had ever taken care of her. And I thought, well, I know how to take care of people. That's the one thing I know how to do. Being needed. I told you that was the whole hole in me. And here was a woman with a lifetime of needs, and every one of them looked to me like a place I could be useful. You see how a man talks himself into things. I'm laying it out, so you can see the machinery of it. The first money was her mother. About 3 weeks into that second trip, Malou got a call and went gray in the face. Her mother had collapsed, Sugar crisis. They'd rushed her to a hospital in Tacloban, and the hospital wouldn't do anything more until somebody put money down. That's how it works out there, I learned. No deposit, no treatment. She was crying, trying to figure out who to borrow from, calling relatives. I said, "How much?" She wouldn't say. I made her say. 60,000 pesos, she finally told me. About $1,100. And she said it like it was the moon. To me, it was $1,100. I had 115,000 sitting in a bank, doing nothing but reminding me my brother was dead. I sent it that afternoon through the app. And the look on her face, relief and shame, both at once. This woman who'd never taken a thing from me, now taking something she couldn't refuse. She cried and said she'd pay it back. I told her not to insult me. Her mother lived. I met her weeks later, a tiny woman in a hot little room who held my hand in both of hers and said, "Thank you, in the only English she had, over and over, and cried. And I want to tell the doubters something. That was real. Whatever came after, that old woman's gratitude was real, and her sickness was real. I saw the dialysis. I saw the medicine. Nobody faked a kidney. So when people ask me how I got taken in, I didn't get taken in by a lie. That's what nobody understands. I got taken in by the truth. The needs were real. The sickness was real. The love, I still believe, was at least partly real. That's what made it a trap I walked into, with my eyes open, and thanked her for the door. Before I flew home from that second trip, I asked her to marry me. 63 years old, on a beach in Bohol, Alona Beach, feeling like a kid and a fool and the luckiest man alive all at once. She cried and said yes, and then she said, "Dale, you have to be sure. My family will become your family. In the Philippines, it is not just the wife. It is everyone." She told me that. Straight out. She warned me. I said I didn't have anybody left to spend it on. I said it like it was the sweetest thing in the world. Looking at it now, I handed her a loaded gun and told her it was a bouquet. We married 11 months later, once the paperwork cleared. I came back over, and we did it properly. And I moved my whole life, or most of it, to the other side of the world. Getting married out there is its own education. There's the wedding itself, which we kept small at her insistence. A church in Cebu, her family down from the province. A lunch after with lechon, the whole roasted pig, and about 60 people I mostly couldn't talk to, who all called me sir. That ran me around 300,000 pesos, call it $5,400, and honestly, it was the best money I spent in the whole business. I've got pictures. She's laughing in every one. Then there was the visa, the 13A they call it, the marriage visa that lets a foreigner stay. Lawyers, documents, trips to the immigration office, waiting on plastic chairs, more documents, and there was setting us up to live. We rented a condo in Cebu City, a nice one, up high with a view of the water, and I furnished it. New bed, a real kitchen, a proper desk for my computer so I could keep doing my job back home through the internet, which, thank God for that job, it turned out. It was the one thread I never cut. Between the wedding and the visa and the condo and furnishing it, I laid out something like 600,000 pesos, near $11,000, over those first months. And I started supporting the family. This is the part one want to slow down on, because this is the heart of it. It wasn't one big ask. It was never one big ask. That's not how it goes. It's the mother's medicine, 12,000 a month. It's help with Jasmine's schooling, another few thousand. It's the electric got cut at the province house, can you? It's your father needs a part for the pump. It's my brother, the second one. He had an accident on the motorcycle, just the hospital, just this once. Each one, on its own, was nothing to me. $15? $90? $200? A man who's laid out 50 grand on a kitchen doesn't blink at $90 for a pump part. But one did the books at the end of that first year of marriage. I'm an estimator, remember. Doing sums is the one thing I never stopped doing. And I sat there and added up the little nothings. And the little nothings came to about 300,000 pesos in a year. $5,400, gone in $15 pieces I never felt leave. Call it 25,000 pesos a month, some $450 flowing out of me and into her family like water finding the low ground. I want to be fair. A lot of that was real need. Her mother really was dying by inches. That girl Jasmine really was in school, and I saw the report cards, and she was smart, smarter than any of us, top of her class. I paid for that, and I'd pay for it again. There's not one part of me that regrets a peso that went to that child. But I started to notice something on that first anniversary. The asks never stopped, and they never shrank, and they never, this is the thing, they never came with a plan for them to end. In my world, you take a loan, you pay it down, the number gets smaller. Out here, the number only ever got bigger, and it was always an emergency, always urgent, always today, and Malou was always the one delivering it with tears in her eyes, caught between her family and her husband, and I never once saw the family. I sent money to people I'd shaken hands with twice, and when I'd ask a question, just a question, where'd the last of it go? Didn't we just fix the pump? She'd get this look, hurt, like I'd accused her of something, like I'd shamed her in front of her whole family. And I learned, the way you learn where the squeaky board is, to stop asking. Because asking cost me 2 days of that quiet, closed-off Malou, and I'd had enough quiet to last me the rest of my life. I'd pay almost anything not to be back in the quiet. You see it. I paid to not ask questions. That was the real transaction, underneath all the others. There was a man's voice once, in the background of a call, when she was in the province. A man's voice saying something, and her answering sharp in Bisaya, which I didn't speak, and then coming back to me all smiles. I asked who that was. Her cousin, she said. Boy, everybody out there's got a cousin named Boy. I let it go. I think about that a lot. The way she came back to the phone too fast. Should have asked more. Didn't. Then she brought me the house. Now understand. I'd known this was coming. In the way you know winter's coming. A foreigner can't own land in the Philippines. Not a square foot of it. They tell you that early, and it's true. And every man out there has to make his peace with it somehow. What they don't tell you is how the peace gets made. It gets made like this. Her father has land, the coconut land in Leyte, land that's been in the family generations. And what could be more natural, more like a real family, than building a proper house on it? A concrete house, a strong one, that would stand through the typhoons, where her mother could be comfortable in her last years, where Jasmine could have her own room, where this was the hook, and she knew it, and maybe she even meant it, where Dale and Malou could spend their old age together, on the land, among family. A home, she used that word. Not a house. A home. She'd watched me long enough to know exactly which word to put in my hand. And God help me, I wanted it. I want you to know I wanted it as bad as she did. Maybe worse. 64 years old, and I'd never built the one thing a carpenter's supposed to build. His own house, for his own family, to grow old and die in. I'd built 200 other people's houses. The idea of finally putting up my own with these hands on this land for these people who needed me It wasn't her con. It was my dream. She just held the door. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. We drew it up together at my desk in the Cebu condo. And those were good nights, some of the best. 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a porch. I did proper drawings, to scale, the way I would for a client, and she sat on my lap and pointed at things, and we argued happily about the porch. I estimated the whole thing, materials and labor, the way I'd estimated 1,000 jobs. It came to about 2 million pesos to build it right. $36,000, give or take. That was real money, even to me. That was 1/3 of everything Gary left me, in one swing. I remember sitting with the number a long time, but I'd already spent, I did the math, I'd already spent close to 1.5 million pesos on the courtship and the wedding and the visa and the condo and a year of the family. $28,000 gone. The house felt less like a new decision and more like the roof on a building I'd already poured the foundation for. Sunk cost, they call it. I know the term. I knew it then. Didn't save me. The problem with building on family land, one of about 40 problems, is that you're not there. The land was in Leyte, a full day's travel from Cebu, a ferry, and then hours on bad roads. I couldn't just drive to the site every morning like I would back home and keep the crew honest with my own 2 eyes. And that's exactly the part that matters, and exactly the part 1 gave away. Malou said she would manage it. Her father knew the local men, knew the contractor. It should be family handling family. It was cheaper that way. And how would it look for the foreigner to come lord over the workers? All of that was reasonable. Every single thing she said was reasonable. That was always the trouble. So I stayed at the desk in Cebu doing my drawings for the cabinet company in Iowa, and I released the money in stages the way you would on any build. So much for the foundation, so much when the walls went up, so much for the roof. And the money went, and the photos came back. She'd send pictures. Foundation poured, block walls rising, and I'd study them the way an old builder does, and something in me, the part that trusts a level line, started to itch. The block work looked rough. The pour looked thin. When I asked to see more, asked for a picture of the rebar before they poured, asked what mix they were using, the pictures got slower to come, and vaguer. And there were extra costs. Always extra. The price of cement went up. They hit rock. The first contractor was no good, so they had to get another and pay again. I flew over to Leyte myself once to see the site. Took the ferry from Cebu, and then hours on a road that rattled my new fillings loose, past coconut groves and roadside stands selling boiled peanuts, kids waving at the foreigner in the van. And when I finally stood on my father-in-law's land and looked at what my money had built so far, the builder in me went cold. The blocks weren't laid true. You could sight down the wall and watch it wander. The mortar joints were fat in some places and starved in others, the way you get when nobody who knows anything is standing over the crew. I asked to see where the rebar tied into the footing and got a lot of smiling and shrugging and a story about how the engineer had already checked it, an engineer nobody could quite produce. I said something to Malou about it, gentle as I could. One builder's concern. And I watched her face close up like a storm shutter, and heard, for the first time, that I was shaming her father in front of the workers, that this was how they did it here, that I didn't trust her family. And her father sat there, not understanding the English, but understanding the tone, this proud old man on his own land, and I felt like a heel. So I did the thing I always did. I let it go. I flew back to Cebu and released the next payment. What else was I going to do? Tear down a house my wife's dying mother was going to live in? Over a few crooked blocks? That's what I told myself. The estimator in me knew better, and the lonely man in me paid anyway. The 2 million turned into 2.5 before the roof was on. Another 100,000 pesos here, 50 there. And Malou was in the province more and more now, 6 weeks at a stretch, staying at her parents' old place to supervise the build, she said, and to care for her mother, whose kidneys were failing for real now. Dialysis 3 times a week in Tacloban, which I was also paying for, and which was also real. The condo in Cebu got quiet. My condo, with the nice view of the water, that I'd furnished for the 2 of us. She was gone most of the time now. I'd sit up there alone at my desk doing estimates for cabinet jobs in Iowa, 7,000 miles from Iowa, in an empty apartment in a city where I couldn't speak the language, waiting for a woman who was always in the province, always with the family, always caring for someone who needed her. And I want you to sit with the irony of that, because I sure did. I had crossed the entire world to not be alone in a quiet house. And here I was, alone, in a quiet house. Only now it was hot, and the ceiling fan ticked instead of the furnace, and it had cost me the better part of my dead brother's life savings to get there. That's when the thought started. The one I'm ashamed of. It came in slow, the way rot comes into wood. You don't see it, and then one day you push on the board and your thumb goes through. The thought was, does she love me? Or does she love what I do for them? I hated the thought. I fought it. I'd look at the wedding pictures, her laughing, and I'd think, no, that was real. You saw it. Don't be a bitter old fool like the ones at Rob's bar who hate the whole country. But then I'd send another 60,000 for another emergency and get a thank you, Po Love, and a heart, and then not hear from her for 2 days. And the thought would come back and push its thumb through the board a little further. I needed to know. That was the sickness of it. I'd built my whole life on things you can measure. And I'd bet my brother's money and the last good years of my life on a thing I couldn't measure at all. And I could not stand not knowing. A man who trusts a level line, and I'd hung everything on a wall I couldn't put the level to. So I came up with a test. And I want to tell you plainly, before I tell you what it was, that it was a cruel thing to do. And that, no matter what it proved, it says as much about me as it does about her. I've had 2 years to think about it, and that's the one thing I'm sure of. But I did it anyway. Here's how it happened. That spring, I had a reason to fly back to Iowa for a few weeks. Real reasons. The last of Gary's estate needed my signature in person, and my knees had gotten bad enough that I wanted to see my own doctor about them. So I flew home, and Malou was in the province, at the build, with the roof half on, and her mother on dialysis. So there we were, the whole width of the world between us, talking only through the phone. Video calls at odd hours, her face lit blue in the dark of the province, with the roosters going behind her. And I decided that was the moment. If I was ever going to find out what I'd really bought, it was now from a safe distance, where I could watch her face when the money stopped. So one night, her morning, I called her, and I made my own face go gray, the way I'd seen hers go gray 100 times, and I told her a story. I told her the company had let me go, that they'd found somebody younger, cheaper, to do the estimates, and they didn't need an old man drawing cabinets anymore. I told her the remote job was gone, and I went further. God forgive me. I told her that with Gary's money nearly spent on the house and the family, and no job now, I didn't know how we were going to finish the roof, or keep up her mother's dialysis, or pay for Jasmine's school. I told her the well was running dry. None of it was true. The job was fine. I still had over 2 million pesos left, more than $40,000, sitting safe in the bank in Iowa. I lied to my own wife about being ruined, and I sat there in my dead brother's house and watched her face on that little screen to see what she'd do. I'll tell you what I was braced for. I was braced for her to cry and say, "We'll manage, come home, we still have each other, we'll finish the house someday, God will provide." I was braced, honestly, to feel like the worst man alive for having doubted her, and to spend the rest of my life making it up to her. That's what I wanted. I wanted to lose the test. Her face didn't do what I expected. It went still. Not sad. Still. Careful. The way a person looks when they're doing sums. She asked me a few quiet questions. Was I sure? Was there really nothing left? What about the bank? The one in America? And I said it was gone, all of it. We'd have to stop the support. All of it. Right away. And she said she had to go. Her mother was calling. She'd call me back. She did not call me back. I want to walk you through those next 2 days slow, because I lived them slow. The first day, nothing. I told myself she was in shock. I told myself she was with her mother, or dealing with the workers, that the signal was bad in the province, all the things I'd told myself 100 times before. I sent a message. "Are you okay?" Nothing. I sent another. "I love you. We'll figure it out." Nothing. That little check mark that says delivered, and then nothing under it. The second day, I got scared in a different direction. I thought maybe I'd broken her heart. Maybe the lie had crushed her, and she couldn't face me. And the shame of that, of what I'd done, started to eat me alive. I nearly called her to confess the whole thing. To say it was a test, a stupid, cruel test. "I'm sorry. The money's fine. Come back." I had the phone in my hand. Then Aileen messaged me, Rob's wife, back in Cebu. She said, "Dale, is everything okay with you and Malou? Because Malou's cousin came to the condo today with a key and took her things." And I sat there in Iowa and read that 3 times. Malou had a cousin let herself into our condo in Cebu, the condo I was paying for, 7,000 miles away, and clear out Malou's clothes, her things, in the middle of the day, without a word to me. 2 days after I told her the money was gone. I called her then. It rang and rang. I called again. Blocked. Somewhere in those 2 days, my wife had blocked my number. I messaged her on the other apps and watched myself get blocked on each one by one, the little lights going out. Her Facebook went dark. She was just gone. Overnight, like the man said. A whole marriage. A whole life. A woman who asked me every single day if I'd eaten. And she was gone into that province like a stone into a pond. And the water closed over the top of it and went smooth. I sat in my brother's house in the Iowa spring, snow still in the shadows, and I understood that I had my answer. The test worked. I'd measured the wall, and the wall was not plumb, and it had never been plumb, and I'd built my whole heart against it. And it was the worst thing I've ever felt, being right. Now, if this were one of those simple stories, that'd be the end. Wicked woman, foolish man, roll the credits. But I told you at the start, it wasn't simple. And here's where it stops being simple. And here's where I stop being able to just hate her, much as, in those first weeks, I wanted to. I had a friend back home named Ray. We'd known each other 40 years. Ray spent his whole career as a sheriff's deputy in the next county over, retired now, and Ray is the kind of man who cannot leave a thread unpulled. When I finally told him the whole story, Took me a couple of beers to get it out. Ray didn't say, "I told you so," though he'd have had the right. He just got quiet and said, "You want to know the rest of it, or you want to leave it be?" I said I wanted to know. I'm an estimator. I need the full number. Ray knew a fella, one of those people who finds things out. And between the two of them and some cousins of cousins Ray knew in the expat world, and public records that turn out to be more public than you'd think, over about 2 months, they filled in the wall behind the plaster. Here's what was behind it. Malou was in debt. Deep. And a lot of it was older than me. Before I ever met her, she'd borrowed from those informal lenders they've got out there, the ones who lend at rates that would make a loan shark blush, the 5-6 they call it, and from half the relatives in the province. Debts from when her father first got sick, from her mother's earlier hospital stays, from a failed little store one of the brothers tried to run. She'd been drowning for years before I walked onto that balcony at Rob's party. And a good chunk of the money I'd been sending, the money I thought was buying medicine and cement, had been going to service those old debts, keeping the lenders from her father's door. She never told me. She couldn't. It would have shamed the family, and shaming the family is a thing they will do almost anything to avoid. So she let me think it was all emergencies, because the truth was one long emergency that started before I existed. And there was a man, boy, the cousin. He was not her cousin. He was Jasmine's father, the one who'd supposedly disappeared before the girl could walk. He hadn't disappeared. He'd been around the whole time, in and out. A fisherman, a drinker. No good the way she'd said. But there. And when the new house went up on her father's land, the strong concrete house I paid $36,000 to build, he'd started staying in it. In my house. On the land I could never own, in the house I built for a home, there was another man sleeping under the roof I paid for, and my wife knew it. And that's part of what she went back to when the money looked like it stopped. When Ray told me that, on the phone, I had to set it down and go stand in the yard for a while. But here's the part Ray told me last, and the part that saved me, in the end, from becoming one of those poisoned old men at the bar. Ray said, "Dale, I'll tell you the whole picture or none of it, and the whole picture's got some things in it you're not going to want, because they're not all bad." The mother was really dying. That was never a lie. She died, in fact, about 8 months after Malou vanished, in that concrete house I built, and by every account went a little easier for the years of dialysis my money bought. The daughter, Jasmine, was real and brilliant, and is in a real school on a real scholarship now, partly because her grades were good enough to earn it, grades she got while I was quietly paying her tuition. That child got a shot at a life because a lonely old carpenter in Iowa needed to be needed. I don't know what to do with that. It's a good thing that came out of a sad thing, and it's mine, and it's hers, and I get to keep it. And Malou herself. Ray's fella talked to a couple of people, and the picture that came back was not a cold-blooded black widow. It was a terrified woman. A woman who'd been the family's whole means of survival since she was a teenager, who'd wiped strangers in Dubai for 6 years, who was carrying debts, and a sick mother and a child, and a no-good man, and the crushing weight of being the eldest daughter, the one everyone leans on and no one holds up. She married me, and I do believe some of it was real. The wood talk, the did you eat, the laughing in the wedding photos. You don't fake all of that for 2 years. But underneath the real part, there was terror. Always terror. And I was the thing standing between her whole family and the flood. And when I told her the flood was coming, when I lied and said the money's gone, the job's gone, it's all gone, I didn't test her love. I don't think That's what I tested it all. I put a drowning woman back in the water and watched to see if she'd save me or swim. And she swam. She swam for the shore she knew, the province, the family, even the no-good man, because that shore had never once pretended it might disappear. I was the raft that told her, out of the blue, that I was sinking. What did I expect a drowning person to do with a sinking raft? I'm not letting her off. She lied. She let another man live in my house. She blocked my number instead of telling me one true word. And that cowardice is hers, and it cost me plenty. But I've had to make room in myself for the fact that I lied first. And my lie was crueler, because I did mine on purpose, in cold blood, from a position of safety, with over 2 million pesos in the bank the whole time, just to prove a point to myself about a hole in my own chest that no woman on earth was ever going to fill. So that's where the money landed, since you'll want the number. I'm an estimator, I'll give you the estimate. I sat down after all of it, and I did the books one last time, the way I've done books my whole life. Gary left me just under 6.5 million pesos. Call it 115,000 American. And when the dust settled, I'd spent about 4 million of it. The courtship and the 2 big trips, near 500,000. The wedding and the visa and the condo we set up, better than 500,000 more. 2 years of family support, the medicine and the school and the endless little emergencies, another 500,000 or more. And the house, the home, 2.5 million pesos, about $45,000, standing on land I don't own, in a province I'll never go back to, with another man's feet under my table. 4 million pesos, something like $72,000. Gone. But I'll tell you what I did right, the one thing, and it's the reason I'm not telling you a total ruin story. I never cut the one thread. That remote job, the desk work drawing cabinets for the folks back in Iowa, I kept it the whole time, and it was real, and it never went anywhere. And it's the lie I told her about losing it that ended everything. And I never moved the last of Gary's money out of the American bank. Instinct, maybe. Or the carpenter in me that always keeps one board in reserve. When it was all over, I still had better than 2 million pesos left, past $40,000, and a job, and a paid-off house here in Iowa that was Gary's and his mine. So I lost a lot. I did not lose everything, and the difference between those two, I've come to think, is about the only mercy in the whole story, and I didn't even earn it. I just happened to be too much of a tight-fisted old Midwesterner to keep all my eggs in one basket, even for love. I'm home now, have been for 2 years. The knees got done, new one on the left, and I get around all right. I still do the estimates from the desk in Gary's house, which is my house, in the quiet, which is still quiet, and which I have finally made a kind of peace with. Kevin calls more now. That's a strange thing to come out of all this. When the whole business fell apart, I finally had to call my son and tell him something true about my own insides, that his old man had been lonesome enough to fly around the world and marry a stranger and get his heart handed to him. And Kevin, who I'd never once let in, went quiet. And then he said, "Dad, why didn't you ever tell me you were that alone?" And I didn't have an answer, except that I never learned how. We talk more now. Not enough, but more. The lie I told my wife to find out if she loved me is the same lie of the closed-up heart I'd been telling my own kids for 40 years, and it took losing everything out there to finally quit telling it here. Make of that what you will. I don't hate Malou. I want to say that clearly, because I know that's what you're waiting to hear. Whether I hate her. I don't. I did, for a while, in the ugly first months. Now, when I think of her, it's the strangest mix. I'm angry, sure, a man's allowed. I'm ashamed, more than angry, of the cruelty of what I did to get my answer. And under all of it, there's a grief for a thing that was partly real, which is a worse grief than losing a thing that was all a lie, because you can throw a lie away clean, and you can't throw away the memory of a woman laughing at you eating with your hands, and meaning it. She asked me every day if I'd eaten. I've turned that over 1,000 times. I've decided it was probably both things at once. She wanted to keep the raft afloat, sure. And she also, I think, in whatever room was left over in a life that had no room, actually wanted to know if the lonely old man had eaten. People aren't one thing. Poor and frightened people especially aren't one thing. It took me 65 years and $72,000 to learn that a person can be using you and loving you in the same breath, and that the loving part being real doesn't get you your money back, and the using part being real doesn't mean the loving wasn't. Measure twice, cut once. That was the whole religion of my life, and I went out there and did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I trusted a line I couldn't put a level to, and I built my whole self against it, and it was out of plumb the entire time. But you know what? Some of the boards were good. That's the thing I can't get past. Some of the boards were true. I just didn't get to keep the house. That's my story. I don't know that there's a lesson in it clean enough to hand you. Only this. If you're sitting in a quiet house with money you didn't expect and nobody to spend a Sunday with, be very careful, because that's not a wallet those folks out there are reading. It's the hole in you, and you can't buy your way out of a hole. I know. I tried. It cost me my brother's savings to find out the thing was inside me the whole time, waiting in Iowa, right where I left it. And here we are, and Dale's story sits about where a lot of them sit. Not in the dark, not in the sun, but in that hard, honest light in between, which is where most true things live. I want to leave you with what Dale left us with, because I think he's earned the last word, and he used it well. There's no villain in this one. It's tempting to make one. The vanishing wife, the man in the house, the money gone. But look closer. The way Dale finally made himself look. A woman drowning in a debt and a duty that started before she ever met him. Too ashamed to say a true word. Doing a cowardly and hurtful thing out of terror, not malice. Family obligation out here is not a scam. It is real, and it is heavy, and it crushes good people who were never given a fair choice. Poverty is not the same as wickedness, and a lonely man who needed to be needed so badly, he told a cruel lie to a frightened woman to prove she loved him. Well, he owns that. He came on here and owned it, in front of all of you, which is more than most of us ever do with our worst day. So be gentle with the Dales in your own life, and be gentle with yourselves. If this reached you, leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us your own story, if you've got one. Because somebody scrolling by tonight needs to know they're not the only one who ever flew across the world to fill a hole they carried the whole way there. Take care of yourselves out there. This has been Inside the Philippines Journals, and we'll see you on the next one.